Hi, in this video we're going to be talking about 5 essential networking commands that every tech pro should know. So if you are in the IT field or planning to get into the IT field, maybe into networking specifically, you're going to need to know a variety of commands. And even if you're not in networking specifically, you're still going to need to know some networking to do your job. All right, so we're going to go over 5 commands, and of course there are many, many more. So these are some of the more widely used commands and then commands that you should really be focused on and learn how to use. All right, so this is going to be kind of a general overview of these commands with some examples. I'm not going to get too specific. So after watching this, you should have a good idea of what each of these commands do and what you could use them for. Okay, so we're going to start here with our main list of commands we're going to be using. So you could use these commands to troubleshoot your network connectivity, test your DNS resolution, do packet traces, and inspect active network connections. So we're going to be talking about Ipconfig. So this is one of the more common ones. So this will show you local network adapter configuration, ping, which is probably the most commonly used network command, at least for basic networking. So this will show you connectivity and latency testing between devices on the network. And then we have traceroute, spelled out Tracert. So this will show you hop-by-hop route path analysis, so you can see where something is failing in the network path. And then we have NSlookup, so this is used for DNS records and domain name testing. And then finally Netstat, which will show you active network connections and port auditing. All right, so you could use these all together here to kind of troubleshoot network issues, such as using Ipconfig first to check your IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway status, see if anything looks out of line. And then you could use ping to test between the devices, see if there is an active connection. So not every device is going to be pingable. So just because a ping doesn't work doesn't mean that connection is down. So keep that in mind, especially when you're doing things like pinging websites. Some will let you ping them, some will not. So I always like to use google.com for an outside ping to get out of the network because they let you ping it. All right, then you could use traceroute to isolate network drops. So if you want to pinpoint the exact router hop where the traffic fails, you could use that. And then we have NSlookup. So if you want to query DNS servers directly to test the name resolution, so that's name to IP address resolution. So for example, google.com, and then what IP addresses are associated with google.com. And then if you want to inspect the active ports on your computer, you could use Netstat for that. So you could view open sockets, listing ports, and owning process IDs. All right, so first we're going to talk about Ipconfig for the local configuration for your computer. So this will display all current IPv4 and v6 address values, subnet masks, and default gateways. So this is a good starting point when you're having problems. All right, so in this screenshot here, you can see we ran Ipconfig, and it shows us we're on the local domain, our IPv4 address, and our subnet mask. So this is the subnet mask we're using on this particular network segment. And then the default gateway, which is used to get out of the network, either to, let's say, a different network or out to the internet, or if you're at home, this gets you out through your wireless router out to the internet. And then you can see here we have Bluetooth connection is not connected, and this shows an Ethernet adapter here. And if you have wireless, it'll show you a wireless adapter as well. All right, so things to watch out for. So if you're missing the gateway right here, that's going to prevent traffic from leaving your local network out to the internet or to a different network. So this needs to be correct and needs to be there, period. And then for IP addresses, for IPv4 at least, if you have an address that starts with 169.254.x.x, that's an APIPA address. So that means the device failed to receive an IP address from the DHCP server. So once again, on your home network, that's going to be your wireless router. And for work situations, you could have something like a domain controller or even a Linux server acting as your DHCP server, or even a network device like a router or switch doing that for you as well. So if you see this 169.254 address here, that means this particular computer cannot reach the DHCP server. All right, then if you have a subnet mismatch, that'll prevent direct local communication between network hosts. So you can see here we have 192.168.207, and our gateway has 192.168.207, and then 133 is specific to this computer, and then 2 here is specific to our gateway. All right, and then we have some other variants for Ipconfig, so for more advanced testing here. So another common one is Ipconfig/all. So that'll show everything, including the MAC address, the DHCP server status, lease times, and assigned DNS servers. So you can see we have that here. So you can see similar information, but a lot more detailed. So here's the Bluetooth, here's the Ethernet, here's the main Windows configuration, gives you the host name of the computer. Here's the MAC address right here. DHCP is enabled. And here's our IPv4 address, which is preferred rather than IPv6. And many times you'll also see the IPv6 address in this output. When the lease was obtained, when it expires, then we have our gateway, DHCP server, and DNS server. All right, and then we also have the ipconfig / flush DNS. So this will clear the local DNS resolver cache. So if you're having some name to IP address resolution issues, you could reset this, and then that'll make things kind of start over, for lack of a better term, to reset the mappings. And then if you're not getting an IP address, or you're getting the PIPA one like we saw on the last screen, you could try to release and renew it by running ipconfig / release first. So that'll release the IP address from the computer, and then you could run it again with renew. So that'll drop the current lease and then request a new one from the gateway and the DHCP server. So many times when you do this, you'll end up getting the same address. So keep that in mind if you see that. All right, then we have ping. So this is a very common command to use. So it uses ICMP, Internet Control Message Protocol, echo request packets to check if a remote IP is active. Then it measures the round trip time in milliseconds and calculates packet loss. All right, so here's the common example here. Usually you get 4 tests, and then it gives you how many bytes it's using to send out, and then the time to live. So you want to watch these numbers here to see if they're kind of higher than they should be, and that'll indicate some type of latency. Or if you don't get these replies, it comes back saying, not found or whatever, something like that, then you know you have a connection problem, assuming the other device is pingable and allows ping, like I mentioned before. All right, so like I said, you might get a request timed out. So that could be if that remote host is down, or if their firewall blocking ICMP, or if the path is severed. And you may also see a destination host unreachable error, which means the local or gateway routing table lacks a route to the destination. And then, like I said, you get some high latency or jitter, which will signify network congestion, buffer bloat, or signal degradation. That's when the time and the time to live here are higher than they should be. So this one here, you can see 4 packets were sent, 4 were received, 0 loss, and the approximate round trip time. Okay, and then some more advanced ping options here. So we have ping-t. So this will do a continuous ping. So if you're trying to monitor something to see if packets are being lost or the time to live is fluctuating, you could run this, because then it'll just keep on pinging until you stop it with a Control-C. So that's a good way just to keep something running and monitored while you try and figure out what the issue is. And then also if you reset something remotely, you could do a ping-t to it, and then when it comes back up, the pings will start responding, and then you'll know it's back on the network. So it would just be ping-t with the IP address, or you could even do a website like google.com. All right, then we have the ping-n with the count. So if you want to specify how many requests are sent instead of the default 4, which you see here. So this will keep going. This will let you do more than 4. If you want to do, let's say, 10 or so, you could use the ping-n10, and that will ping it 10 different times rather than the default 4. So here's an example right here. All right, and then finally we have the ping-l size. So this will set the packet buffer size. So right here we have an example where the size was changed to 1472. So this is used for testing MTU boundaries and packet fragmentation limits, such as testing maximum packet size or simulating a larger network traffic to verify the connectivity and performance. So if you're sending larger amounts of data and having performance issues, you could try this out here and see if the performance suffers. All right, then we have Tracert or Tracert. So this maps packet routes. So this will display every router hop and packet that traverses to reach its destination. So this one's kind of hard to test unless you're on an actual network, because if you try and run it to an outside address it's most likely just going to stop and fail once it gets out of your local network. So I actually found this example here from another site that was able to trace cisco.com to show you how it works here. So you can see it tells you each hop, which is, think of it as a step on the network. So here's it leaving the local network, and you can see it's going through these other destinations here, routers or switches online here, going through Washington 1, Atlanta 2, Dallas 1, and it timed out right there, and then it continued here. So it had a little glitch right there, but it was able to continue and get down here after 20 hops over to Cisco. So this works by incrementing time to live values to force intermediate routers to return ICMP or ping time exceeded messages. So it allows you to pinpoint the exact location of high latency, packet drop-offs, or routing loops. So you can see the time values here increasing as we're going along. And then it maps each router hop between the source and destination, revealing the network path. Like I said here, all the different hops or steps. So if it times out, let's say right here, it timed out and didn't get any farther than that, then you could kind of troubleshoot this hop right here to see what the problem possibly is. All right, so how do you speed up and customize your trace route? So you could use some other switches like -D, which will disable hostname resolution for each hop IP address. This will speed up the trace route by skipping reverse DNS lookups. And you could also use the -H with the max hops. So this will set the maximum intermediate hops. So the default is 30, and you can see here it was able to find it in 20. It'll usually go to 30 before it stops and times out. But if you don't want it to go that far, or you want it to go farther, you could change that value here with the max hops. And then we have the -W timeout. So this adjusts the timeout period in milliseconds for each hop reply. So this prevents false timeouts on congested WAN links. So here's the command -W with the value of 500 with the IP address after that. All right, and then we have NSlookup. So this queries DNS servers directly to inspect host name to IP address resolution records. So this is not just used in Windows, it's also in Linux and Mac OS. So this verifies domain IP mappings, tests DNS server health, and validates email security records. So this also supports forward and reverse DNS lookups to identify host names from IP addresses and vice versa. All right, so we have an example here doing an NSlookup for OpenAI.com. And you can see server is unknown, and that's because in this example, it was being run from a local computer using its internal records here, so it doesn't know anything about a DNS server. And here is the local address of the computer that is running the command here. And then it found OpenAI.com with its public IP address right there. So this tells us for OpenAI.com, this is their IP address associated with that name. And of course, many of these websites are going to have more than one IP address, so keep that in mind. Okay, and then if you want to do more of an advanced query, so you could query specific records like MX, mail exchanges, text records, or name server records. And here's an example command right here. And you can do a custom DNS query. So if you want to use an outside DNS server like the Cloudflare 1.1.1.1 instead of local, or the Google 8.8.8.8, you could use that as well. So for example, if we do NSlookup OpenAI.com using Google's DNS server, you could see for the server now it shows DNS.Google instead of nothing, and then the DNS server address matches right here. And then it found OpenAI.com, and here it found two different IP addresses, probably most likely for some load balancing for their website. And you can see this time it found the 104.18, found the 104.18 as well, along with this one. All right, then we have some advanced NSlookup query methods. Okay, so right here we did an NSlookup. So default server was unknown because we're running it locally instead of specifying an outside DNS server. Here's our local address here. So we set the type to text, and we set the domain to wikipedia.org. So once again, server unknown with our IP address. So for the first one here, this is the SPF. So this tells the world which servers are allowed to send emails from wikipedia.org. And it stops scammers from spoofing emails pretending to be Wikipedia. So you can see that right there. And then we have the Google proof of ownership, verifies the code pasted into DNS to prove to Google Search Console that the person setting up the site actually owns wikipedia.org. So this is going to be a lot of gibberish, unnecessary stuff, but I just wanted to show you some of these extra commands. And then we have the same thing for Yandex, verification code, and there might be others as well. They could decide which ones they want to have shown, so they're going for the bigger ones here. And then down here we have some other options you could use, such as the mail exchange, MX, CNAME, text, name server, and so on. All right, so finally we're going to talk about Netstat. So this is used for port connection and auditing. So this audits all active TCP and UDP connections, listening ports, and protocol statistics. So you can think of this as a network monitor for your computer. So it shows every active connection, open listening port, and background app talking over the internet. All right, so it audits your active connections, tracks your listening ports, and identifies the responsible program using that port. So here are some key switches that you could use with the netstat command. So you could use -A, so this is one of the more common ones. This displays all active connections and TCP UDP ports in a listening state. -N will show IP addresses and port numbers in pure numerical format, skipping slow DNS lookups. -O displays the owning process ID, or PID, for each connection for task manager cross-referencing. And then -B will display the executable name creating each connection, but this requires an elevated command prompt to do so. All right, so we have some sample output here broken up into two screens. So this was all from one command here running -ANO. It just took two screenshots here to get all the output on the page. All right, so first we have the proto or the protocol column. So this will either be TCP or UDP. So TCP uses two-way communications, such as for web pages and email. Then we have UDP, which is another way of connecting without the handshake. So it's not as reliable and it's used for things like streaming and online gaming. All right, then we have the local address. So this shows your computer's IP address and then the port number assigned to the app that it's using. So here we have the same IP address here and then different port numbers depending on the app it's using. All right, then we have foreign address. So this is the outside server's IP address and port that your computer is connecting with, if it's connecting at all. So if it says all zeros, that means no outside connection has been made yet, like you see here. All right, then we have the state. So it's the current state of the connection. All right, so when it says listening, that means an app on your computer is sitting open, waiting for the outside data to arrive. Then if it says established, that means there's an active live connection currently happening on the computer, like to a web browser, for example. And if it says time wait, that means the connection just finished closing and your computer is briefly cleaning up the leftover packets. All right, then we have the process ID. So you could think of this as the unique tracking number that Windows assigns to the app making the connection. So for example, you see dozens of connections sharing the same number, like 11384, for example, right here. That number belongs to one specific app, such as a web browser with multiple tabs open. That's why we have a lot of the same number. All right, so basically just look at the state, find any lines that say established to see any active connections, or listening to see open background doors. Check the foreign address. Look for the port number, just like 443 means standard web browsing, for example, like you see here. And then you could also take the PID or PID, process ID. Then you can match up that number in Windows Task Manager under the Details tab to name the exact app running behind the scenes. So it does look like a lot of information, but it's not super complicated at the same time. All right, so there is your high-level overview of 5 essential networking commands that you should know. So hopefully that made sense, and hopefully it gives you a better understanding of what you could do with all these commands. All right, thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe.